name is Paul Ramsey. I'm a practicing hypnotist of 20 years. I started in 2004. Just to give you a little bit of sense of my credentials, I formerly was educated to be a teacher. I have a bachelor's in English teaching and a master's degree in secondary education, and that ties directly into what we're going to experience today. I look at hypnotism differently than a lot of hypnotists. My big thing is always reverse engineering. I have an issue that I'm pretty vocal about. Those of you that know me, you're not hearing anything new, but I think the biggest problem with this profession is that the training is shit. And so I'm like, we need to do something about that. And it's no one's fault. I think a lot of people are doing the best they can. But as a person who is educated to be an educator, I just see there's a lot of poor teaching that goes on. And so what's happening to a lot of you is you're caught in, again, a well-intended, sustained model of imitation and mimicry. And we need to stop that. And the way you're going to stop that is by dedicating yourself to understanding mechanics, functional design and mechanics with regard to hypnotism. And so that's what we're going to do for the next hour. Can we all agree that hypnotism is a skill? Yeah, right? And so the first thing I want you to keep in mind is, so skills can always be improved. This isn't about acquiring more content knowledge. It is about working processes and getting tighter in your skill set. And what's great is that's just myelinating pathways. As you get a better sense of how to do things, then you can work those pathways and your myelination can increase, and I shouldn't assume. So myelin is a fatty protein in your brain, and it's what coats your neurons. And it forms around the axon of your neuron like rings of a tree. And the more you use a neural pathway, the more the brain goes, okay, we're getting a lot of usage, we should make this pathway better, and it grows more myelin around the sheath. It's very much like an electrical cord. This is probably better than talking about it like rings of a tree. The myelin is the rubber, right? The axon is what's sending the electrical signal, and the more myelin you have, the more rubber, the less leakage there is, and so you get better results, okay? So if you're agreeing that hypnotism is a skill and you want to improve your skill, then at the broad level, you have two choices. You can do shallow practice or you can do deep practice. Shallow practice is, I want to increase my free throw percentage, so I'm going to shoot 10,000 free throws, and hopefully I'll get a bump. Deep practice is, maybe I'm not going to shoot 10,000 free throws, maybe I'm only going to shoot 5,000, but I'm going to have someone who actually understands the mechanics of free throw shooting, make sure my wrist is where it needs to be, my elbow's where it needs to be, my shoulder's where it needs to be, my legs move the right way, and get it all broken down and practice doing it the right way. We don't really talk about that in this profession. What we do a lot of is watching and imitating without the breakdown. So I want to help you break down some stuff today, and I want to encourage you so that from this day forward, when you're on YouTube or you're taking someone's program and you're watching video, you're escaping from really just watching it so you can imitate it. Think like a game coach. My earliest journey into coaching was Little League. I started coaching Little League with one of my best friends in high school when I was 16. And we, very much like what I've been talking about with this, we were just doing what our coaches had told us to do. We were now telling these kids to do. We didn't understand how it actually worked. So you give Johnny a bat and you say, if you're a righty, left hand goes on the bottom, right hand goes on the top, pull your hands back, get your elbow up. Why does your elbow go up? Well, that's because that's what you're supposed to do. All the trophies look like that, right? Well, the reality is what we eventually learned that no one ever told us when we were kids is your elbow is meaningless other than in lifting your elbow, you lift your shoulder. You can, if you drop your shoulder, the whole swing plane dips. And so you're going to cut under the ball and miss. The easiest way to, but it's weird no one ever says lift your shoulder, lift your shoulder. What, lift your shoulder? Okay, but if you say get your elbow up, it's just a natural lever and it gets the shoulder in place, and then you're more likely to get through. So we didn't know that when we were 16. We did 2 years of kind volunteering for our community, and we helped kids play ball. I went to college. They couldn't follow the schedule anymore. College didn't match up, so I stopped coaching, and my friend Chad kept coaching. And he went on until he was in his 40s. And he got into the AAU system, he started doing coaching clinics. My friend Chad knows more about baseball, he's got more baseball knowledge in his pinky than I have my whole body. And as he was calling me over the years, he'd call me. I just took Bucky Dent's camp. I got to hang out with all these old Yankees, and we were in New England, which was funny to hear him say. I was like, you did that? He's like, yeah, for the coaching, because we were Red Sox guys. But he started saying, did you know that there are 3 ways to throw a curveball? I don't know. He goes, they only usually teach kids 1 in Little League. He goes, but what they don't realize is you can get away with it when you're a kid because you're not very strong. He goes, but then they've learned to throw it that way, and they keep throwing it that way. And as they get older and they have more muscle, now they're throwing it hard, and it puts too much stress on the elbow, and then they ruin their elbow. So a kid who had a promising ability to maybe get a college scholarship, now he's blowing out his elbow and all that's ruined. He goes, so there's a Little League curveball, and then at some point they should be transitioning you to a grown-up curveball. Whole different hand position, different rotational plane, stuff like that. I was like, wow. And so that started making me aware of like mechanics really matter. And that applies to what we do as well. So today we're going to talk about footwork, we're going to talk about hips, we're going to talk about arms and shoulders, we're going to talk about head and neck, and we'll do it hopefully within the context of the things you like to do. And if there's stuff that you want to do, I think that way maybe you've done some things, and we can get you to think about them differently, and then maybe we can show you some new things as well. But that's what we're going to be doing. If you want to learn more about deep practice and shallow practice, the best book I've ever read to really start getting your head around it is called The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. In The Talent Code, Daniel Coyle goes around and he travels around the world. He goes to Russia, he goes to the Caribbean, he goes all around America to what he calls hotbeds of talent. Why is it that the Brazilians were for so long so dominant in soccer? Like Europe was the birthplace, and all of a sudden the Brazilians were just killing everyone at the World Cup over and over, right? And then he found like there's this tiny little island nation in the Caribbean, I can't think of the name of it right now, but they almost every year now they make it to the Little League World Series. There's only like 100,000 people on the whole island. So they shouldn't be able to compete with Bridgeport, Connecticut, but yet they do over and over and over again. And he's like, what is going on? So he started going around to these hotbeds of talent and interviewing the coaches. He was like, what are you doing? And what he found over and over and over again, once he talked with enough and broke it all down, they were always doing deep practice. They were never doing shallow practice. They were people who were getting so into what they did, who were so passionate about it and wanted to know it at the deepest level, that they were, with much less resources in some cases, producing the highest standards of excellence and performance. So I think, again, there's a pretty reasonable transfer there to our world. All right, let's start with footwork. Footwork establishes balance. Footwork provides mobility. Footwork, so I'm working feet up. And I think, again, I 20 years in this business, I've heard one person. I heard Scott Sandlin once say, I can't remember who he said, but he goes, you ever watch so-and-so work? And I go, no. He goes, he's got the best footwork I've ever seen. And he's the only person I've ever heard talk about our craft like that. We need to be talking about our craft more like that. Maybe not in the clinical world. I'm not sure that I'm gonna be like, Tim Horn, you need to be working on your footwork when they're sitting on your couch. But if you're here, I assume it's because maybe you wanna do live demo, maybe you wanna do shows, maybe you wanna do street hypnosis. If you're gonna be up and around, footwork's gonna be important. So always first for safety for you and them, but also it helps you get better results. So Graham, can you just come up? No, you got a broken foot. You stay there. So just as something simple as like what most people would traditionally call a suggestibility test. So let's say you're gonna do just like magnetic hands. So you say that Mike, would you like to do a suggestibility test?
Absolutely.
All right, great. So what I'd like you to do is just put your feet shoulder width apart, tiny little bend in your knees so they don't get sore, and then take your 2 hands and position them like this. Excellent, outstanding. I'm going to take this index finger, I'm going to place it between the hands. I'd like you to visually fixate on that hand. Now, in a moment, I'm going to pull this away, but I want you to stay oriented to this space between your hands, okay? Good, focus right there. Good. And then I start my pattern, and I get the hell out of the way. But I want to do it without, you're good, thank you. I don't want to be like, the whole idea is to not distract. You ask them to orient, help them stay oriented and fixated. So anything that's like head on, if it's not about, now if I was doing visual fixation, which I do sometimes, where I'll say, what's your name?
Scott.
Scott. I say, Scott, pick any spot on my face and stare at that spot on my face. And as you stare at that, now I'm holding, I need to be right in front of Scott, right? I'm trying to get it going. But if that's not the case, if we're not oriented here, just, that's it. But again, that, you go, yeah, do it. Like, practice it. Practice, like, I don't know dancing stuff. I don't know, is that a ball change? Or I don't know, but like, work it where it feels good and it's so smooth that they just don't notice and they're continuing and their focus is there, right? Scott, come up here for a second. I'm not gonna actually do this with you. I'm just gonna walk through it so they can see the physicality, okay? But a lot of people know I do a shock induction that most nobody does, and people tend to think it's pretty cool. So what I would typically do is I would say, Scott, can I show you the fastest way that I know of to put people into hypnosis?
Absolutely.
Great. So what I'm gonna ask you to do is, you're gonna come right over here and stand here. All right, good. Feet are just great, just like that, feet together. All right, and now I'm gonna position this hand on your shoulder. I'd like you to take your right hand and bring it out waist high, just like this, and then fixate on the back of your hand. Now, my footwork here is really minimal again, but I can't be here, I can't be here. I need to be tight in here, and I need to have a forward foot and a back foot. They can't be parallel, because then I've got no balance. So I've got to have a load leg in the back and a front leg, and then I'm gonna do, right, so then I go from there, but this doesn't really matter. Let that relax now, you're okay. But I'm here, and so I've positioned my feet so that as the process goes on, when I finally do what I'm gonna do, if I do it well, Scott's gonna just stay standing here. And I've got this hand for security. I've got what I call top control. I've got a free hand after that I can also wrap, or I can go lower if I need to. Some people would just hinge, but I've got it. It's very hands-on. And this is another part of, if you're gonna start doing this stuff, you need to make sure you pick someone who's comfortable with that. You might need to literally say, I'm gonna be really touchy with you in this, is that okay? And they go, yeah, it's okay. And you could have people who, they don't listen to you and they don't keep the legs rigid. I'm not gonna expect you to do that. But imagine if Scott let his legs go and he started to go down to the floor, then I might need to squeeze him so that he doesn't pound his knees into the floor. I might need to squeeze him to me and help ease him down. You also, I do what's called hooks, where I might, if I sense that that's happening, I might slide this hand in like a forklift. Now I can ease, if he's going back, right? See how, it's natural, it's body language stuff, it's kinesthetic suggestion in some ways. So, thank you so much, that was great. But it starts with set the feet, move the feet, know where your footwork is, get it where it needs to be, so that whatever, there's like 3 or 4 different things that could happen there, I'm good either way. I've got, if he goes forward, I can load all my weight on my front leg. If he goes back, I can load it on the back leg, and I've got a little bit of side to side, right? But you gotta set up the feet first. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then after that, it's not much after that. Then it really, beyond that, it depends on exactly what you're doing. But this is the thing, is like, when you have like, what we broadly call tools in your toolbox, the stuff you like to do, go back through it and start, what am I doing with my feet? Like, actually walk through it all by yourself. You know, run through it. What do I do with my feet? Do I need to change it? Do I need to rotate? You know, I've seen people, I've had students, when I trained students before, they're just new and it's okay. And they do something like, don't cross your.
Can you come up front so we can see your feet?
Yeah, you know, don't cross. Like this, it's a terrible place to be. If something fools you and you go, now you're really in trouble. Because then how do you control someone? You want everything to be able to adjust. So go through whatever stuff you like to do, walk it through, and what most people do is they focus on their pattern. We overemphasize, like language matters, of course, but people overemphasize, what am I saying? I do nonverbals with people at some of my live demos. I don't say anything. Work on the breathing, work on the eye contact, know where your body's gonna be, right? So footwork. Questions about footwork? We can come back to it. We're just gonna get through and then keep going. Hips. I think hips really are, in some ways, even more important. But go back to, it's okay if you don't really know a lot about baseball, you'll get this still. Your hips are your center point. They're the rotating hinge for the whole core. What you do with your hips then determines how your shoulders go and what your feet can do if you need them to. So if you want to hit a fastball in baseball, you have a swing plane. And if that thing's coming fast, the best way to hit a fastball is to open your hips early, because then what that does is when you open your hips, your shoulders are already going too, and the hands have to come through quicker, right? So you're gonna get quick on that ball and hit that fastball. Now, if someone throws a curveball and you're a right-handed batter, it's gonna start coming in here and it's gonna curve away. Well, if I open my hips early on a curveball, now I can't get to it, and that's how they fool you. So that's the old, like, throw you a fastball, and you're timing, you're like, throw that again, me, and then they throw you this big lazy curve, right? And you're already opening, and then you feel foolish. You're like, oh. But if you're ready and you know, you keep it closed, and you go, oh, that's a curveball. You keep the hips closed, now you can reach out and hit it to right field, and you get your single. But the hips are where it starts. So these things are gonna happen when you're on stage too. Where your hips are going determine where you're going and where you can help them go. So being aware of how your hips are moving. So, Ralph,
Yeah.
Come over here. Where I see this most commonly, how many people do arm pull induction? Okay, arm pulls, if you face me, Ralph, please, great. Arm pulls, traditionally, you're gonna be relatively square up on the person, and you're gonna have, there's various ones. You're gonna have some level of, we're doing stuff, Ralph, we're doing my pattern, and then you get to that point where you're like, I'm ready to pull the arm, and you pull the arm, and if everything goes well, Ralph, blah, and you're like, aren't I great? Everyone goes, oh, you just pull this arm, and then what I see all the time in videos online is, it's really the issue, it's hips, but it's also a mental, it's because of anticipation. You know what your protocol is. You're like, I give my pre-instructions, I get them set, they're nodding and telling me they're ready, I take their arm, we're pattering and everything's good, and then at some point in your head, you're like, I'm ready to pull. And what I see so many people do, it's footwork and hips. They go, they know they're gonna pull toward themselves, so they take a small step back and they open the hips. 3 inches, 2 inches. But now what I've done is I've increased the distance between me and Ralph. So if I stay home and I pull Ralph's arm, just this, see, he goes down. But if I open, yeah, good, reset. Now, but if I open up, now I've increased the distance and I pull and he's come, see, you felt it right on your toes, right?
Yep.
Now they're coming forward. It's not the end of the world, they still go. But now, as opposed to in situation 1, this, he stays balanced, I can just do this, and we're pattering, and we're doing this, right? Easy peasy smooth. If we go the other way, and I pull him forward, now you can do, now they start to do this, and you're trying to like, okay, and it's all because you pulled them forward. They didn't want to go forward. You pulled them forward. You're making more work for yourself, make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just that little act of opening the hips and taking a small step back creates that whole situation that you have to manage them more physically. And I didn't pick you because you were big, because you were sitting down. This is a great example. Like, I'm a big guy, Ralph's a tall guy. Like, I don't want to have to manage him physically. I want him to stay home, stay balanced, and make me look good. So on arm pulls, keep the hips closed, don't anticipate yourself, know what you're doing, and then when you go for your pull, it's just a little down pull. With handshake inductions and arm pull inductions, the 3 biggest things are forward pulls, not helpful. You know when people go in the gym and they do those big ropes, People do that. They'll have them, that's when they do a hand, and they'll go, oh yeah, what are you doing? You're not helping anybody. When I was early and I didn't know better, I did that once, and I heard the wrist go crack, crack, crack. You're like a chiropractor, So I don't do hands. I get in here, where I'm just above the wrist. So I'm doing forearm. I'm just doing an arm pull. I'm not doing a hand pull where the wrist is getting mobile and it's getting weird. And it's just a little pull down. So I'm pulling the wrist. I'm not snapping anything. I'm not cracking that gym rope. And then I don't have to worry about that. I'm not bringing forward. Does that all make sense? But again, footwork and hips, just a little thing like that. You start watching now, when you watch videos on YouTube, you'd be surprised how much, now that your RAS is tuned to it. Yeah.
But I think the knees are important too. I mean, decades of doing martial arts.
Yeah.
Drop your core.
So that's your center of balance is going to come from you dropping your knees and your hips, right? So again, it's loading your legs. If you're doing anything like this, and especially if you have anyone that's bigger than you, you're changing stuff up and you want to be ready for it. Anyone who's taller than you, anyone who's bigger than you want to make sure, again, if I'm doing this arm pull right, I can keep my feet parallel and we're going to be okay. If I'm doing it wrong, I'm increasing the danger for myself and for Ralph, because now if he is coming to me, they're parallel. I don't have a way to keep the balance and the load. Even if I drop my knees, it's terrible. If you're doing something where you think there's a possibility that they're gonna come to you or away from you, then you need to stagger the feet and you need to bend the knees so that you're loaded. And you can change very quickly. You can go forward, I can pick the leg right up if I want to. You can go backward, and it's one leg or the other. It's fine, but you've got to be ready for it. So yeah, you don't really ever want to have your knees locked out when you're working. You always want to have your knees bent some. Yeah.
So it seems to me like there's also an implied kinetic suggestion here, in the sense that if, like when you were stepping back, then it's a tell, and then they're expecting it, so you lose part of the shock of the pull.
You could, usually when you're doing like an arm pull, it's a neat idea, but if you do enough variations, maybe. Okay. But usually when you're doing an arm pull, you're having them focus here,
gotcha.
And you're working the arm, and they're here with you. So they don't usually see you make this step because they're so here, right? So you're working the arm pull here, and you're patterning, and you're asking for fixation, and you're looking for that moment. Now, right now, as I'm talking to Ralph, he's pretty fixated, but he's got tiny. I want to find that moment where it stops. When it stops, and I know I have full attention, then I pull, because that's going to be the trance doorway moment. Okay? So many. I have a student, Diego, in Spain, who one day when we were having our session, he goes, Paul, Ralph, you can sit. Thank you so much.
Okay, yep.
He says, Paul, can I show you something? And I go, yeah. And he sends me this link, and it's a video that he found on YouTube of Shawn Michael Andrews down at ICBCH, I don't know what year, and so it's a room, it's like this, right? And Shawn's going around the room, and he's just showing. He's doing like every time a different method. So he's like, then boom. He goes there, then boom. He goes there, then boom. And Diego goes, how can he do that? He's getting everybody. I go, do you know who that is? He goes, no. I go, that's Shawn Michael Andrews. He's been doing this a long time. I said, do you know where he's doing it? He goes, no. I go, it's a hypnosis convention. It is? I go, yeah. I go, everyone there is a trance puppy. I said, Shawn's very good at what he does. I go, let him go out on the street and do that and show me 100%. And Shawn knows that wouldn't happen. He'd get more than most, for sure. He's awesome. But, like this is, again, when you watch stuff online, if you're new, it's easy to go, how come I can't? You go, you don't understand what's going on. You don't get that. Like, relax, be gentle with yourself. But what I was able to show him that day, we ran through that video 5 times. And then finally, after we talked about that stuff, I said, never mind what he's saying or what he's doing. I said, in fact, never mind him at all. Let's watch it one more time and just watch the volunteer. Watch their eyes, and that's it. And then when you went through, you could see every single time, no matter what Sean was doing, he didn't do it until he had that moment where all peripheral movement and stuff stopped and there was pure fixation. And at that moment, he's like, I got you. And then he did his snap or his pull or his forehead touch, or always. So the other thing is if you want to get into arm pulls or handshakes. So now we're moving into arms. We've gone from feet to hips, now we're up to arms. When you're doing arms, like, bless you, like, I see a lot of people, like, again, if you don't know, it's okay to say you don't know. And if you're willing to just take a guess, take a guess. When you think about this, again, this is where the deep practice happens. Don't just watch the arm get shook or the hand get shook. Think of what's it doing. When someone's doing a handshake induction, what is the handshake? There's a couple different kinds. So, Michael, stand up. So, first there's classic pattern interrupt handshake, where you go, Michael, can I show you something really cool? Sure. Great, awesome. I'm Paul, by the way. Here's what I want you to do. There's your pattern interrupt handshake, where the handshake never happens, and then you bring it up, and you're creating a moment of uncertainty, and then you're going into fixation. Your transition is to fixation, and you pattern from there. Thank you, that's good. Then, the other thing you can do is you can do an actual, you ready? That's cool. Like, here's what I want you to do. And then you start your pattern, and you're doing a little bit of this, right? And some people really like to feel pulse, that's a preference. Some people like to just have a finger, they'll have a thumb and a finger, and as they're doing it, they're not really shaking the hand at all. They'll squeeze as they patter, and it's a distraction. It's just, again, it's to get them like wondering, like, what's going on? What is happening? Why are we doing this? And you're trying to, again, you don't want them, what you're trying to do is get them to not analyze your pattern. You're trying to overload. So I'm patterning, and we've got visual fixation going, and I think it'd be great if you let yourself just have this experience, and as we keep patterning, and you let yourself do that, and you're nodding, and I appreciate it, it's so great. Take a nice big deep breath in, and the whole time you're doing this stuff, and breathe out, and then you pull and sleep. But what I see sometimes in newer people is they're doing that whole thing, and they're like this the whole time. We're not pumping water, like you know, and this isn't doing anything for you. If anything, it gets annoying. They're like, why are you doing this to me? You know, like it's there's no subtlety to it. Or I see too, they'll go like this. We're not jumping rope, like they'll be. It's too, and I think some of that is maybe sometimes it's our own nervousness about like, man, I really hope this works, or it's our own busy energy as we're doing it. It's you don't have to do that. It's a lot of times the subtle things are what kind of get you there, you know? It's just a little, and it can, Michael, one more time. I like to, when I'm doing this, I like to do my pattern and I'm running everything, and I say, go ahead, take a nice big deep breath in. Breathe out and just let that feel even better. So you can match, it's like a pacing, right? Like it's kinesthetic. You can lift it on the inhale and let it come down on the exhale. You can lift it on the inhale. You work it in three. I like things in threes. And then on the third one, if everything's going well, one more time, and then you're not just letting it down, you're here. But you don't have to be. Thank you so much for this. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. What are we at on top? Huh? 32? Oh, we're okay. All right. Arm pulls, underhooks. I talked about that earlier. Actually, sometimes you got a forklift. Overhooks. I talked about that too. Sometimes you got over. Okay. Forehead taps and pokes. It's another one. You're looking on YouTube and you're looking at people's stuff, and you'll see he's like really nice, like they're talking to you, and they're and as you just focus on the sound of my voice, you might find that it feels so good to let yourself and then focus on and sleep. Like when you go, what? And look at what he naturally did. Snaps back. So again. First of all, I still think it's very nice. like it's not the nicest experience to give someone. But second of all, you are again potentially creating a situation where you have not prepared for what happens if they really go back. If they don't have a chair, again, if you're on the street, if you're doing something where someone's on a bench, you could send them totally over backwards. And so again, little things, but they matter. Like so I think forehead pokes and. The other thing is, what's the other thing? Forehead pokes are the big ones. I'm like, why are you doing that? But it can be as simple as It's just all it has to be is a touch. It's just signifying, okay, it's time, touch. You can do the old, Dave Ellman used to really like to do 2 fingers and come down over the eyes. He wouldn't actually touch the eyes. He might trace the forehead and then go over the eyes. And they watch those fingers go over the eyes, and so they just instinctively close their eyes. In these really fast shorts, reels on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, because people have such tight, short attention spans, there's no context anymore to a lot of this work that's being done. And so I remember, it was over a year ago, I think it was Diego. Diego's, oh, I have to show you something. All right, show the kid's so awesome. He sent me this video of this French guy who on his TikTok, he kept just going up to people and he would just walk up to people and go, boom, and they would keel over backwards and fall in the swimming pool. And he'd do it at swimming pools, lakes, anywhere where there's water. And they'd have their phone in their hand, they'd be talking on their phone, and he'd walk up and he would just go, boom, and they'd go back over in the, and he goes, what is happening here? And I'm like, that's a great question, Diego. I don't know, because all he's showing you is the wow moment. So I talked to Grant. I was like, Grant, do you know this guy? And Grant was like, I don't know him, but I've heard of him. It's Xavier, right? Yeah. And so Xavier's really good at getting watches. Like, he's good at using his social. And so when we dug around, what we find out was he was getting hired at these campgrounds. He would do a show. These were the people that were hypnotized in the show. He knew he could reinduce them like that. And he was taking the time to he'd get them positioned by the pool, and they had phones that had the coating on them so it wouldn't ruin their phones if they went in the pool. And he wasn't ruining people's phones, and would I do that? I don't think I would feel comfortable doing that. But it wasn't as when you got some context around it, it wasn't as shocking as what you saw in the video, and that's my point. But we have a lot of people now, I don't know if we have a lot, we have a fair amount of people who are really worried about getting followers and getting views, and so they're more fixated on that and want that hype moment. So that's what it does lead to, more of the head pokes and the collapsing and the that kind of stuff. And if you can do it safely, I'm fine with that stuff. But I would just hope that people are thinking about it, that they're having a real thoughtful process. And I've seen some, again, where a simple thing, like I saw one with a guy in Mexico, and he was in a big courtyard in some city, and he had a young lady, and she was sitting, she'd been hanging out with her friends, and she was sitting on this cobblestone courtyard, and he did the head poke with her, and he was not ready for what he did, and she went right over backwards. She could have cracked her head right on the cobblestones. Even though she was sitting, it was enough of an action. Because again, that shocking reaction is it can with some people turn into a throw, where they don't just melt. It's like you're not giving them a melting feeling. You're giving them a lightning bolt feeling, right? And so she went, and luckily she went back over, and I don't know whether she instinctively rotated or she just got lucky, but she turned and she landed on the shoulder. He tried to, you could see he was like, oh shit, and he tried to reach and cup the neck. It was too late, he couldn't get it, and she went down, and he just got lucky. So there's a lot of that stuff, and again, how do we want our perception to be? How do we want to protect our ability to practice, our ability to get insurance here in the United States? If you talk with Dale out at the table, we're down to 2 companies. We only have 2 companies that we can get insurance for stage hypnotism right now. That's it. If we lose either one of them, if we lose, there will be a group of performing hypnotists who will not be able to get insured, because the other company will not insure new hypnotists. They will not insure hypnotists who do adult entertainment and adult content, and they will not insure hypnotists who didn't previously have insurance the year before. So if you took a year off, something happened, they're like, we don't want you. So when we have that happen, Dale has to move them to the other company. But if that company stops, we don't have. And if any of you know of other options, I would come up and talk with me, go talk with Dale. We're trying to find them, but he's been working on it for months and months and months and months. since we started forming this organization, the ISHA, really, he's been working on it, and he's like, I'm running out of options for you guys. So it's pretty serious. And so again, these things, like our ability to protect each other through how we practice and the choices we make, is really, really important. Really important. Grant?
I think you made a great point then. I mean, Xavier's is a great hypnotist, what he does, a great showman. But it's not the person who's necessarily doing it and putting it on TikTok. It's like you said, it's the people that then see that and then try to replicate it and that don't necessarily have that same skill.
Yeah, that's a great, thank you for that follow-up point. That's again, yeah, so what Grant had said was, you have to keep in mind too, the people who are getting interested in hypnotism and they watch a clip like that and they don't understand the greater context and they're just trying to imitate what they see on the clip. And it's gonna go poorly, right? This is where, again, we have to get away from the imitation. We've gotta get more dedicated to come and understand the mechanics, you know? So yeah, the mechanics and the functionals are really, really important. Dennis?
Most people don't understand, you touched on it. The things you see on the internet, where they instantly induct them. How many people did they try it before that it didn't work?
Yeah.
All you see is their end product, not the 200 other people that didn't go
So
with it.
for the recording, Dennis just said you gotta keep in mind too, so many people show like rapids and shocks on the internet, and
Yeah.
they only show their successes. They don't show all the times that they failed. My student, Zach Pinsons, I was so proud of him very early in his career. He was doing so great, and he put up a video one day that was all fails. It was just, he said, he goes, you know, I've noticed like so many people don't do this. He goes, I just want you all to know, I fail at this point a lot more than I succeed, and I'm okay with that because I'm learning all the time. He goes, watch. And he had edited together, even just him walking up to people and going, hey, you want to do some hypnosis? And they'd be like, get the fuck out of here. He had everything. He had everything. He had all that. It was awesome. It was really great. Scott.
Is that video still out there somewhere?
If you go to Zach's channel and dig deep, it'd be probably like 3 years old or 4 years old at this point, but yeah, it's there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great, yeah, they're just laughing at him or being like, go away from me, like, and you know, and yeah. And it was mostly the fails of just people not being willing to work with him. Yeah, in that video it was. But it was that same spirit of like you have to thicken your skin if you really want to do this, because you're gonna get no's a lot more than you're gonna get yeses. You know, I was proud. It was really good.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I have a little bit of time left, yeah.
So this isn't a question, it's just a comment
Yeah.
so I'm coming from the clinical world, and I love like being exposed, like how finely you guys take your craft. Like, it makes me feel so much better about like what you guys are doing and like how much effort and intentionality you put to it, and it makes me rethink about like the mechanics of what I'm doing. Even though
I'm not representative of my profession. I'm not joking. Like, I appreciate that. Scale that down, because I'm on a crusade, and I have some beautiful people that are working with me, but overwhelmingly, people don't talk like I talk, and they don't talk like Grant talks, and you know, so we're trying to do better. We're trying to do better. Yes, sir.
I think what you're doing is really brilliant.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about body dynamics.
Yeah.
For someone who is trained in martial arts for 41 years
Yeah.
and understanding hips and
Yeah.
where that is, this could be something that you could create a certification for that actually may assist with insurance, in the sense of, I understand
Yeah.
how the body works. I
Yeah.
understand what's going to happen, because even though we know how our body works.
This could be something that you could create a certification, and then you could come talk to us at the International Stage Hypnotists Association, and we could collaborate. That'd be awesome.
But just 10 more seconds.
Yeah.
When you talk about the movement that you're doing,
Yeah.
it's increasing the drama. It's also increasing the participants' understanding that you're going to take care of them
Yeah.
from a physicality
Yeah.
standpoint. So what
Yeah.
you're doing is great, and this is a nice surprise.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so glad I didn't make that finer point that you just said about you can do this stuff better, not just from a functional standpoint, but from a theatrical or drama standpoint.
Yeah.
You can do both, and that's craft. This is what we keep talking about.